Welcome on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton. We're here at the LBJ Library. We're in the parking lot, actually. Texas just finished its practice, first spring practice of the 2025 season. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel. Thank you all for joining us here. Jerry and I already had immediate reaction, but CJ, you were able to go write an article, think a little bit more about it. Let's start with some of your key takeaways that might be more nuanced.
Right.
Start with something you mentioned in that article. You talked about the coach to player ratio on defense in particular, and exactly what you mean by that, because I thought it was a very astute observation. A lot of individualized coaching going on.
Yeah, it certainly felt like there was more hands-on, more one-on-one, more maybe three guys to a group going on for a specific coach. And I thought that was really interesting. Of course, we've been out here plenty of years, Bobby. It felt like this year specifically, it was more toned down in terms of the hands-on and structural teaching that was on scene today, specifically with the defensive backs. I mean, Duane Akina, Kenoto Hudson, Mark Orfe, all three had a different group. They rotated around, but those groups weren't larger than four people. And I think when you're able to get guys in groups like that, you're able to see some sort of you're able to see more, essentially.
You mentioned, I gotta cut you off. This is Duane Akina. You posted this also on Twitter, and Adrian Phillips and Quandre Diggs both had a little saying about it and said he's back. He was definitely vocal out there as well. But to your point about limiting the number of players within a group, it helps get them more reps too, and more detail oriented. But obviously, Duane Akina back there, along with Orfe and Kenoto Hudson.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just in that defensive back room where it's going to be pretty young, pretty inexperienced. You got to figure out what these guys can do in a quick amount of time for the spring. Of course, with Coach Kwiatkowski being the defensive coordinator, he's got to oversee everything. But now with Leon Clark taking most of that edge room, he can focus on specific techniques or drills or just anything that goes into the pass rush. I thought that was really interesting. We saw it again with Chris Jackson and Jamie French to begin the session. It stood out to me, and I can't help but think this is going to help in the long term as you start to focus more and more on these OTA practices.
Hey, and you're coaching. Here's the other reality. It's a younger team.
Absolutely.
And so they need more hands-on TLC, for lack of a better term. You mentioned that Kwiatkowski taking Colin Simmons aside. It even set Colin Simmons back from the next drill.
Right.
They just let the next guy run in.
Let Zeno Umuzulu get a first-team rep.
Yeah, exactly, because it was that important. So I think that's an astute observation, as well as welcoming Duane Akina back to the fold at the University of Texas. The quarterback room looks really, really talented. The receiver room, I think there's two receivers right now that Texas can rely on in this group that are playing, and that is clearly Ryan Wingo and Parker Livingstone. Beyond that, we got some young guys that got to figure out who they are and what they're going to be at the University of Texas. But Livingstone looked like he's ready to go. Wingo's definitely ready to go.
Yeah.
He just looked phenomenal out there today.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Of course, with no DeAndre Moore, you have two guys right now that I would feel comfortable with trotting out there. And, of course, I think Parker Livingstone has come a long way from his freshman campaign. Of course, he was that guy that was going to be next man up should an injury have occurred late last year in the playoff run. Now it's him and Wingo. I've mentioned this before on other streams, Bobby. You're either penciled in or you're pinned in. And it's all kind of a spectrum right now on these early depth chart projections. Ryan Wingo pinned in, Parker Livingstone getting mighty close to that as well with no DeAndre Moore out there. But I'll tell you what, and there's a long way to go for this young group of wide receivers, but there's a lot of talent. You see a lot of those traits that made these guys so talented coming out of high school. Dalen McCutcheon will start there because I know you liked his route running, how smooth he was.
Yep.
That stands out immediately to me. I think Jamie French is very polished. He's probably the next guy up of that freshman bunch. But the raw traits of a Michael Terry, the raw traits of a Khalil Lockett, my goodness, they were sporadically on display, I would say, during day one today.
Yeah, I felt like you could look around and see what you saw and why they were ranked so highly.
Right.
But I don't know that any of them are Ryan Wingo.
Right.
Because they're not physically that way. The only one that comes close physically actually is Michael Terry. But, CJ, I thought he was the furthest away from being ready. He didn't get the depth some other receivers got, didn't have his hands ready as often as the other receiver because he didn't play receiver that much.
Right.
in high school, and certainly not getting a ball thrown with the velocity that was being thrown out here. Arch Manning, definitely the leader of the offense, in my opinion, taking the lead at quarterback. Trey Owens, KJ Lacey looking pretty good as well at this point in time. CJ, I look around at this, and I think that Texas has a chance to have a really talented offense. They just got to put it all together. On defense, you got to look at Travis Shaw.
Yes.
You got to look at Cole Brevard and the big guys up front. Jerry and I did not talk about them all that much on our previous video. I want to give you the floor and let you talk what you see, say what you saw there.
Well, first thing that stood out to me after looking at the roster that was handed us before walking into practice, Travis Shaw, 6'5", 350. He was listed at 335 at North Carolina. 350 is pretty big. Bobby, Texas has done well with those bigger bodies. He didn't look 350.
No.
I would say he carried 350 very well, for as well as you can carry 350, right? So the one thing I was able to watch some drills, some of those first steps off the ball, that's always going to be Travis Shaw's strength, right? Is that first initial step. Now it's up to Kenny Baker and that interior defensive line room to figure out how to get more out of the second, third pursuit as well. But you see the 5-star pedigree of that athleticism with that first step, that hand quickness off the ball. That's going to be encouraging to watch as well. But Cole Brevard, I think that's going to be your first team interior defensive lineman. If I had to kind of project what that might look like, I would say Brevard and Alex January towards the end of camp. Right now, of course, they're throwing everybody in there, including Hero Canoe, who saw some good time with that first team in pursuit.
Yeah, Alex January was first team as well. We need to mention that. The other thing that I would say about that group, and this is where it's interesting to me, CJ, we don't know how they're actually going to hold up against the run, but to your point, Cole Brevard looks like he should hold up against the run.
Yes.
And I would add this, he looks like he's in really good shape for the way his body is fitted. Does that make sense to you? He basically looks like a fire hydrant that's in shape, if that makes sense.
It's funny. I saw him obviously for the Ohio State and Arizona State games during bowl season and in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He's got a big gut on him. Now that you could be, two ways about it. With the way that he performed at Purdue, that big gut is not going anywhere. And I think, again, when you have the concerns or maybe unknowns about the interior offensive line, to be able to go up against these guys that are, again, 335, 350, who knows how big Josiah Sharma actually is as well, that's a great sign in terms of getting best on best in the run defense and run blocking departments that are both a bit of a more concern right now.
You look further along the line. What did you make of Wardell Mack seeing first-team reps at nickel today? We thought Jelani McDonald might get first-team reps there, but he was in the secondary at safety alongside Michael Taft. What did you think? What did you make of that? And is that a position now, given that Jalen Gilbo is trying to make something happen at corner,
right?
Is that the position we need to watch for this season?
It's going to be really interesting. Obviously, Texas pretty light at safety. Is that where Jelani's going to start and eventually move out of as healthier bodies start filtering in? We'll have to wait and see. But to see Wardell Mack there, I think it fits his strength as a football player very well. You go back to his tape coming out of high school, the way that he punches at balls, the way that he closes in on short distances when the ball is nearing, that was one of his biggest strengths in my opinion. Now we'll have to see how aggressive he is in the run game, shooting gaps in terms of the screen games, because I wouldn't necessarily classify that as a strength of Jalen Gilbo the way I would a Jahdae Barron, who Texas fans very familiar how quickly he was able to diagnose and create tackles for loss back there. But for Mack, a guy that's very quick to diagnose, very quick to run and shoot upfield, I think this is a good starting spot for him. But yeah, I was pretty surprised to see him running with that first group.
And any other thoughts that you had that you want to pass along? Because obviously, Jerry and I have talked quite a bit already, but anything you individualized want to think about and talk about?
I'll add this on Jalen Gilbo, because I'm very much in that same kind of boat right now where I was last year with Jahdae Barron, just unknowns. How quick is he? How fast is he? Can he be a guy that catches up to a Barrion Brown or, some of these guys in the SEC that Texas will have to face that run mid-4.3s? Is that going to be a concern? It's an unknown, right? But again, I think Jahdae Barron came out last month and silenced everybody by running a 4.39. Will that be the case again with Jalen Gilbo, who's now outside corner? It's too early to tell, Bobby, but I'm excited to hear about some of these practice returns.
I want to say this, and I didn't mention this earlier, and it's something that I need to add here. We spent a lot of time talking about the young freshman receivers at Texas, whether it's Jamie French, Khalik Lockett, Michael Terry, Dalen McCutcheon. Talented group.
Yes.
Based on what I saw today, I'm not sure the secondary guys that came in aren't as talented, if not more so.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to put that out there. Cade Phillips looks like what an NFL corner is supposed to look like.
Right.
Long, lean, runs, and reacts. Zealous Hicks is already a good 20, 25 pounds thicker and heavier than Jordan Johnson-Rubel, for example. All of those things, Caleb Chester. We know Jonah Williams isn't here, but I'm not so sure, this is just a personal opinion, that at the end of the day, the defensive backs that Texas signed, when we look back in 3 years,
yep,
that they might not be a better group than the wide receiver group, which, that may be controversial to say, but if I'm having a big takeaway from this, the secondary that I saw out there today from a young standpoint looked as good or better than those young wide receivers.
Yeah, I would
Just
agree.
personal opinion.
Look, and we've talked about it. 4 guys coming in or have arrived already at that wide receiver spot. 19 stars amongst them, and I know stars don't translate to college success, but there's a reason why they were highly touted, highly recruited, and highly ranked. But that defensive back class, Bobby, I'm right there with you. Cade Phillips, we know what Jonah Williams can do.
Stud. Cade Phillips looks like you're supposed to look, man.
Not quite out here yet for Jonah Williams, but I mean, that's a guy that we're all expecting to have an early impact as well. So I'm really excited. And then a guy that we haven't mentioned yet is Caleb Chester. And this first spring for me, the one thing that I hope I hear a lot about is his football IQ, because that was something that stood out to me when talking to him on Texas football after his commitment prior to his signing. This is a film guy. Does that kind of allow him to take that leap if his athleticism does not?
Yeah, I agree with that. And here's where, again, that's going to be my main takeaway. I'm not so sure that the defensive backs won't end up being, as a group, a better group than the wide receivers at Texas. I don't know why. I just feel like they may be more physically special than the wide receiver. The wide receiver group obviously can catch and all that, make people miss, yada. But from a physical perspective, I'm not so sure that they didn't end up with a gem of a class.
Those battles over the next 3 years, whether it be spring ball, fall camp, in-season practices. Whew.
Yep. Another big takeaway, a couple of big offensive takeaways for me. Christian Clark back.
Yeah.
Man, he looked. I think he would have played last year, guys, if he were healthy. That's number one. Number two, Parker Livingstone, to your point earlier, he looks like the number 2 receiver right now. And definitively, by the way,
I would say quite a gap.
Yeah, there's a gap between him and everybody else, other than Ryan Wingo, who's the number 1. And then I want to say this as a freshman that surprised the heck out of me. It's Emery Winston.
Yeah, he looked good.
Yeah, he did. He's got an interesting build.
Yes.
It's not the big body tight end, long on. He's kind of a smaller tight end, but man, he snatches the ball and he has a big trunk. So he's not a smallish guy, even though he may not be 6'5", right? So he's not built like a Jordan Washington, who's more longer limbed, right?
And it's going to be interesting. Can he make an impact early this spring? Again, this tight end room, in my eyes, they're going to have to go add somebody from the portal. We'll see if that is actually carried out or not. But you got Nick Townsend coming in. We'll see what Jordan Washington does as a step forward in year 2, and Spencer Shannon as well. But that tight end room, it's interesting right now.
I will say this. After today, if you had to ask me where do they go in the portal, I think they have to have a wide receiver now.
I agree.
Because I just don't think those young guys, that's a lot of – in this system, it's a lot on them and you're not sure if any of them are going to come through yet, because I don't think any of them are as, and I say this, I don't think any of them are as talented as a Ryan Wingo. And so when I saw Ryan Wingo last year, I was like, that's a dude, right? they're all good. I don't know that they're that uber talented, right? And so I think you need an older wide receiver to mix with the group that you have with Moore, Livingstone, and Wingo. And then to your point, I think they need a tight end. Now, I will say this. I understand why Tashard Choi said, I'm probably good at running back.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I was thinking, why wouldn't they go get a running back right now? You know, and after watching Christian Clark, I get it.
Which is amazing.
Yes, it's amazing
Yes.
that he's back after an Achilles injury. But my point being, he is an inside zone runner. He is, I mean, I'm almost sure he would have played last year had it been available, because he has that inside vision, little squatty body, quicker than fast, but makes split-second decisions. Really, really high on that young man as well. So.
I agree. Final takeaway from me, and I'm not sure if you noticed it, but it was evident to me after a few throws. MLB scouts like to use the term lighten up the radar, right? You know, you see a guy throwing gas on the mound, you got the guns out, you want to see what that registered across the plate. I would have liked to see what some of those passes today from Arch Manning and Trey Owens
they
would have registered.
They both can.
But it was a significant difference from previous springs, right? We know that's not the MO of Quinn Ewers in his right arm.
He liked to feather it.
Yes, it was the accuracy, the finesse, the feather. Yes. This is a little different. We saw comebacks. We saw some out routes, obviously some deep balls, but all of them with high velocity. And that's something that I think will unlock a new level in the Sarkisian offense. And I'm excited to see it with Arch behind center this spring.
You know what? You're right. The deep ball looked different.
Yeah.
Those two guys have those two. When you say a guy has a live arm, Trey Owens has a really, really live arm. Arch Manning has that professional arm. And to CJ's point, when you watch Quinn Ewers, you know, the comebacks weren't really there very often, unless they were really open, right? These are a little bit different because they can get it out and snap it. And I will add this, I'm not so sure that part of that and the young receivers' consternation today or issues today,
part of that
weren't because, all right, I don't know who you had at quarterback in high school, but you didn't have these guys.
It was guys like me.
Yeah, the ball was on them
early,
and so they didn't really have a chance to react like they normally would.
I agree.
And so maybe we'll see. Hopefully they're going to have practice available to us on Thursday. We'll get another chance to look at these guys as well. All right, CJ, anything else before we let people go?
No, again, day one out here. So we talk about defensive backs, we talk about wide receivers, tight ends. Who knows what this might look like after the 15th practice, but through day one, a lot of talent, a lot of speed out there, and a lot of big humans. Again, it's been a recurring theme from last year. It's built over again this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we start looking back on who and where the most NFL talent was if this team 3 or 4 years from now didn't have just that.
I will say this. It has a lot of talent.
It's young.
A lot of talent. I want to say one last thing that we didn't talk about. I like what I see for the first team offensive line. Brandon Baker, I've got a way to describe him. No wasted motion. Very efficient player, which is hard for someone so young. I mean, and so I actually think that they're going to be fine on the offensive line. I don't know that they'll be, quote unquote, improved, but I don't see this huge drop off despite losing Kelvin Banks and four starters total. I just don't see it. That's a testament to how they've recruited as well. All right, that's going to do it for CJ Vogel, Bobby Burton. Thanks to our producer behind the scenes, Matt Hutchison. You guys have a good one. We've got later today with Pro Day, and then we have another one tonight, guys. Y'all have a good one. Hook 'em. First day of spring practice in the books.